The U20 World Cups has officially started with Japan vs Nigeria kickoff. And man, I cannot hold my excitement for the insanity we are promised in this arc. However, what's a better way to celebrate this excitement for this insane arc we are about to witness than trying to actually write the perfect course of events? This is Blue Lock's U20 World Cups if it was perfect. Now, we already know the group stages and even the starting lineup for Japan, so this part is rather easy. We are just going to predict what will happen in each game. Then, when we reach the knockout stage, the real fun begins. Not only do we have to predict the results and even the teams, but also we gotta do all of that while building the perfect narrative and story. Like, how would the perfect U20 World Cup tournament go? Who should face who? What teams would be eliminated both off and on screen? But more importantly, how will the writer deliver the most hype while leading Japan towards a U20 World Cup's victory? However, for now, let's start with the group stage. How will Japan fare in this unexpectedly harsh group? I wouldn't say it is a death group, but the teams selected are rather interesting. First is the most voted likely to win the whole tournament, France. Which I don't know about you guys, but I am really fearing this game. However, next is the birthplace of football, England. Which, while being very exciting, it is also kind of a bummer, and more on that later. However, finally, Nigeria, who are the dark sheep of this group. However, you gotta look at it this way. African teams are usually full of surprises in real World Cups. Just ask Morocco in the last competition. And actually, let's start with that. Let's start with how will Japan fare against Nigeria. Now, straight up I gotta say, the idea of Japan losing to Nigeria is just absurd. I know it would set the World Cups ablaze, but I really do not see it happening. Not with many Japanese players being actually close to the new Gen 11 level. I mean, at least Rin and Isigi are, and the rest like Bachira, Hiyori, Karasu and Aiko are definitely close by. And so, I don't think Japan will be losing this game at all. What I think would be best is actually for this game to end in a draw. Now, a 0-0 draw is pretty impossible and honestly would be boring. A game with no goals is not right for a shonen manga. Hell, even a 1-1 score isn't that good. I think a 2-2 score or even a 3-3 score would be perfect. What this means is, or I should say how this will go, is actually both Rin and Isigi score a goal, and for the most part Japan will be dominating the game. However, out of nowhere Nigeria pulls an upset and get a draw in the last moment. And I feel this guy here would be the key to all of this. I can really tell that he looks like a speedster, and so he might be fitting to steal a win. And I know the other three characters are rather interesting as well, especially with this tall guy that looks like a defender. I think the glory will be all thanks to this guy here. Which, by the way, I want him to be either on Chigiri's level of speed or hell even faster. And he would be the MVP of Nigeria. I know the focus right now is on this panda looking guy, however I am really intrigued to see what this player specifically could do. I feel like he could be the one to neutralize Chigiri's level of threat and at the same time be the one to actually tie the score and save Nigeria 1 point. And again, I feel like the main guy here could be a genius or even a talented learner with metavision, but I highly doubt he is on Isigi and Rin's level. And so I feel like a speedster stealing a draw from Japan would be perfect. And honestly, an unexpected comeback and a big upset from Nigeria at the end of the game would be everything Blue Lock needs. Simply because I feel like after the Neo Egoist League, the Blue Lockers are kinda cocky right now. And I know they are fighting satisfaction due to what happened to Nagi, but still, I feel like they need a reality check that this is the world stage. This is football at its finest. But what I think would be even more fire than this is actually the next game, which in my writing will be against France. And guess what, guys? Loki will wreck them. He would literally mop the floor with them. As you all know from the 3 minutes he joined in the Neo Egoist League, not a singular Blue Lock player is on his level. And so I simply think he will run rampant, destroying everyone in his wake. Especially because Charles is playing with him and we might see a Charles and a Loki chemical reaction. I mean, we might get yet another new Gen 11 in France, but I feel like it's not necessary. Charles and Loki alone will be a hell of a threat. As for the score, I am thinking about 2-0 or 3-1, with me actually leaning towards 3-1. Hear me out, Isigi and Rin both feel hopeless, and they both fail to overcome Loki. However, all of a sudden Ego has a brilliant idea to get Shido in the match. There, the the latter would form a chemical reaction between him, Hiyori and Isagi and steal a goal under Loki's nose. And by the way, I am down for either Isagi or Rin to score here as long as they lose with 2 points difference. That's so we can witness the power of Loki. However, before we move to the last game, which will be against England, I want to actually explore a little bit how did England fare against Nigeria and France. In its first game against France, they get completely clobbered by Loki. However, in their game against Nigeria, they actually snatch a win, with Nigeria trying to do everything to survive, however it will be to no avail. And so England will have 3 points, while Japan only has 1, which means it will be a death match. Whoever wins gets qualified next to France. Now it goes without saying we need to have a new Gen 11 on England's side. He needs to be either a wing or a midfielder, I don't really care. England specifically needs to have a new Gen 11. And so what I think would happen is a fierce battle with 3-3 score, with both Rin and Isagi dominating and scoring. However, England proves to be one hell of a team, and so they too score goals and it is 3-3. There I think there is a perfect player who fits in these situations. A player who excels in forcing goals when all hope is lost. Of course, I'm talking about Boroshowi. And by the way, a draw wouldn't really serve Japan because they would get only 1 point while England will end up at 4, which means Japan really needs to win. And being in a pickle, I think Baro would be the perfect player to get them out of that pickle. I feel like Baro lives and dies by his ability to force a goal when all hope seems to be lost. And so in a true king fashion, Baro will force a goal at the last moment, giving Japan their ticket to the knockout stage. His character is all about this, so I think it is only fitting. The only other player I could see pulling something like this is Isagi, however I feel like his moment should be at the finals, and not really now. I mean sure, I want him to score in almost every game, but a moment like this, I feel like for Isagi it should be saved for the finals. And so I think Baro is the only fitting character other than Isagi. However, getting to the knockout stages means that we get introduced to the Buratsuta 3 players. Now, from now on onwards, Sai is obviously going to start. However, for Nagi and probably Kira, I don't think they would play yet. To be honest, I don't see them having that much of an impact, especially Kira. Maybe Nagi will get his moment, however, for Kira, I don't know. In any case, however, let's actually figure out who might face Japan in the knockout stages. However, I gotta say this, what I think would be more fun for the U20 World Cups is that we don't get things only from Isagi's perspective. Instead, we get to see other teams that we know like Germany face off screen with other teams. Maybe winning, maybe losing, we'll decide that later. For now, I made this chart and put the teams I chose in it. These are the ones I think the writer might choose because historically they always did good in the World Cups. So obviously we have Japan, and I am going to add South Korea just as the secondary Asian team. Then from Africa I have actually chosen Morocco or Senegal. I mean Morocco could be swapped with Egypt, but I feel Morocco is better right now. From North and South America we have the following teams: Brazil, Argentina, the US and Uruguay. Then from Europe we obviously have France, Germany, Spain, Italy, Belgium, Croatia, the Netherlands and finally Portugal. Again, I feel like these need to be the teams. Judging by how historically they performed in the World Cups, I feel like it is only fitting to include these teams. And before anyone tells me I am biased, just know I am from Algeria and I did not include my country simply because Morocco right now is far better. However, with the teams chosen, let's actually look at the brackets. First of all, we know that France needs to be the final boss, especially since Japan already suffered a loss against them, and I would assume Isagi specifically would be looking for blood against Loki. And so, and judging by how strong they are, it is only fitting for Japan to actually face them in the finals, and honestly that's the easy part. Next, for the semi-finals, I feel like there are a few teams that could be worthy of being here, however, I honestly believe it should be Spain, just so we can see Sai versus Bunny. Next, for the quarterfinals, I feel like Brazil or Argentina will be perfect. One of the two giants of South America would be just the perfect team before Spain and France. And finally, for the round of 16, at first I was about to choose the US. However, I feel like Italy would be more fitting. As for the US, I have better plans for them. And so let's start from the bottom and work our way up. For Italy, I am choosing them specifically due to Lorenzo. I feel like after Baro gives Japan their ticket to the knockout stage, facing Lorenzo will be just perfect, especially if Italy presents the secondary center back of the new Gen 11. Now that would be insane honestly. because unlike Ubers, we will have a truly iron wall. And I feel like Lorenzo actually locking down Baro would be just hilarious, especially after the latter's insane performance in the previous game against England. And so what I think would happen is actually Japan winning with 2-1 score. First, Italy will lock down the Japanese strikers, not allowing them to score whatsoever. Then, and this is a big one, I feel like with Sai, Isigi and Shido will be the ones to break the iron wall. I feel like Sai leading an attack with both Shido and Isigi will be devastating to Italy's defense. And to be honest, I feel like that's the perfect writing for the first game of the knockout stages. However, and before we move to the quarterfinals, I actually want to talk about two other games that happen at the same time. The first of which is actually Brazil versus Argentina, a classico of sorts, and I really hope to get to witness some of it. At least as a way or a tool for the writer to hype the winning team that would go against Japan in the quarterfinals. But the other game I really wish to see as well is actually Germany versus the US, with Kaiser and Ness pulling something amazing and actually eliminating the US. For the quarterfinals, as I said, I have Japan against either Brazil or Argentina, but also I have yet another spicy game involving Kaiser. To be honest, I feel like Kaiser and Ness should not reach their potential in this tournament specifically, and so what would actually be perfect is for Germany to face Spain, and Bunny to be the one to actually eliminate Kaiser. This honestly would hype the man to no end. Not only do we have Isigi who is excited to face him, we have Sai's backstory with him, but also he would be the one to actually eliminate the other New Gen 11 striker. And honestly, this just fit in, and I hope the writer actually shows us what happens. At least show us the same of the Manshine vs Barsha game in the Neo Egoist League. However, and going back to Japan, I think facing Brazil or Argentina will be the biggest challenge to them yet, as a perfect way to write this is actually for the team to have the other New Gen 11 forward midfielder, the one who is right beside Sai. However, instead of having insanely absurd strikers, what will be different here is actually the team will not compromise any fodder. They would be one hell of a team that is all on a high level. They might not be Isigi or Ren, however the team as a whole is just absurdly strong, and this would make them so hard for the Blue Lockers to deal with. Not only it is hard to score against them, but they also hit like a truck, all as one unit. And I feel like Baro and Bajra specifically would shine in this game. First, I think Baro might be the one to open the score. However, after the game ending up in a tie and going into the extra times, I feel like Bajra would shine here. And with the help of Chigiri and maybe Sai, he would be the one to pull off an insane originality that would actually break the Brazilian or Argentinian team, much like he did against Team Nagi in the first selection. And by the teeth of their neck, Japan pulls yet another win. However, next is the second most anticipated game, Japan vs Spain, who have recently just eliminated Germany. Now, the game will start by Sai, Isigi and Shido dominated. However, Bunny and the Spanish team will prove so much for them that it honestly feels hopeless. There, and I honestly, hopefully wanna see this, we see the Itoshi brothers unite against Bunny. Both Ren and Sai work together to crush Bunny and Spain. And I feel like that's the perfect writing. Maybe at first Shido and Isigi will score a goal. However, then Bunny proves why he is the New Gen 11 striker and forced 2 goals, putting Japan in a pickle. There, and only the chemical reaction between the Itoshi brothers is able to break the Spanish team, with Ren actually scoring 2 goals, completely dominating Spain with the help of his brother Sai. However, ladies and gentlemen, we reach the finals. It is Japan versus France. Now, to be honest, for the other teams and who eliminated who, I really do not care, and I doubt the writer would care either. They would be just fillers so we can get to the final stage against France. And here, I honestly feel like it is going to be Isigi's game. It will be the U20 game all over again, with Isigi slowly taking the stage of Sai and Ren, and being the sole hero of Japan. Now, I truly believe that Loki is simply capable of scoring 3 goals no problem throughout a game, and so I am putting that as the benchmark, which means Japan would need to score 4. I feel like Rin specifically needs to score the opening. He needs to be the one to actually gives Japan hope. By working together with his brother, he will be the one to force the first goal. Then I feel like Shido or Bajiro would be perfect for the second goal. However, and I know it might be a little bit predictable, I feel like Baro must be the one to tie the score. And before we reach the final goal, I want to talk about Chihiri and Zantetsu, who might actually work together in order to stop Loki. I know they are far from reaching him, however I feel like the harsh environment environment of the U20 World Cups would be perfect to nurture them, and at least when they work together they are able to match Loki, or for the very least they are able to lower his options. And I feel like this will be especially interesting with the help of Shido, Rin, Isagi and Sai. Together all of them would stop the duo of Charles and Loki. And finally, and even though it is predictable, I can't really have it any other way. Isagi needs to be the one to score the winning goal against France, and he needs to be the one who actually led Japan towards a World Cup win. I cannot have it any other way. Japan needs to win in the finals against France specifically, and honestly it needs to be Isagi the one who will deliver the fatal blow. However, what do you think guys of my writing? Did I actually excite you for the insanity that is coming your way with this arc, or do you agree with certain aspects of my writing? Please let me know in the comments. However, with that, I really hope you enjoyed the video, and until next time, thank you for watching.